Krak des Chevaliers, known in Arabic as Hizn al-Akrad, Hosn al-Akrad, meaning Fortress of the Kurds, stands as one of the most remarkable examples of medieval military architecture in the world. The renowned T.E. Lawrence, better known as Lawrence of Arabia, described it as perhaps the best preserved and most wholly admirable castle in the world. Located in present-day Syria, near the northern border of Lebanon, this imposing fortress has captured the imagination of historians, architects, and visitors for centuries, serving as a testament to the military ingenuity and strategic thinking of the Crusader period. And before we start, if you're new to the channel, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you'll get our videos as soon as they're released. The site of Krak des Chevaliers was originally fortified in 1031 CE when a castle was built for the Emir of Aleppo. This initial structure predated the Crusader presence in the region and was part of the defensive network established by local Muslim rulers. The strategic importance of the location was evident from this early period, as it commanded crucial routes through the region and provided an excellent vantage point over the surrounding countryside. The castle is built on a spur of land with the natural defense of steep slopes on 3 of its sides, and the site was previously the location of a castle built by the Kurds. This geographical advantage made it an ideal location for a fortress, as it provided natural protection whilst also offering commanding views of potential approaches. The Knights Hospitaller, also known as the Order of the Hospital of St. John of Jerusalem, acquired the castle and extensively rebuilt it in 1144 CE. The Hospitaller Order of St. John of Jerusalem constructed the castle from 1142 to 1271. This acquisition marked the beginning of the castle's transformation into one of the most formidable fortresses in the Crusader states. The Knights Hospitaller were a military religious order that had been founded in Jerusalem around 1023 to care for sick pilgrims. However, during the Crusades, they evolved into a powerful military force charged with defending Christian territories in the Holy Land. The acquisition of Krak des Chevaliers represented a significant strategic gain for the order, as it provided them with control over a vital corridor between the Mediterranean coast and the interior of Syria. Architectural surveys and sections of Latin and Arabic inscriptions that have survived show that major phases of work occurred between the 1140s and 1300s, with additional modifications continuing into the early 13th century. The castle underwent continuous development and refinement over more than a century of hospitaller occupation, reflecting both the evolving needs of its garrison and advances in military architecture. Early records indicate that the initial design included a small enclosure and a central stronghold, possibly built from basalt and limestone blocks gathered from nearby quarries. The availability of local building materials was crucial to the castle's construction, as transporting materials over long distances would have been impractical and expensive. The design of Krak des Chevaliers is one of the best examples of a concentric castle, along with the castles built by Edward I of England. This innovative design principle involved multiple layers of defensive walls, with each successive layer positioned higher than the one before it. This arrangement meant that defenders on the inner walls could fire over the heads of those on the outer walls, creating multiple lines of defense that attackers would have to overcome. The fortress has 2 concentric towered walls separated by a wide moat. This double wall system represented the pinnacle of medieval defensive architecture. The outer wall provided the first line of defense, whilst the inner wall, built on higher ground, formed a secondary and more formidable barrier. The central defensive enclosure is surrounded by a second enceinte, built on a lower ward, studded with towers of various shapes that point to several phases of construction and reconstruction. The variety of tower designs reflects the evolutionary development of the castle over time, as different architectural styles and defensive needs influenced successive building campaigns. The castle was defended by a stone curtain wall studded with square towers which projected slightly. These projecting towers allowed defenders to provide flanking fire along the face of the walls, creating killing zones where attackers would be exposed to fire from multiple directions. The main entrance was between two towers on the eastern side, and there was a postern gate in the northwest tower. The main entrance was heavily fortified and designed to funnel attackers into a confined space where they could be easily targeted. The postern gate provided a secondary, more discreet exit that could be used for sorties or escape if necessary. The main enclosure was surrounded by a man-made moat which was carved out of solid rock in a dramatic example of Crusade-era engineering. This impressive feat of engineering involved removing thousands of tons of rock to create a deep ditch that made undermining the walls virtually impossible and forced attackers to expose themselves whilst attempting to cross. At the center was a courtyard surrounded by vaulted chambers. These vaulted chambers served multiple functions, including accommodation for the garrison, storage for supplies and weapons, and spaces for religious observance and administration. The castle could accommodate a garrison of 2,000 men. This substantial garrison size reflected the castle's importance and its role as a major military stronghold in the Crusader defensive network. The core of the garrison included knights and servants. According to the rule of the order, each knight was given 3 mounts, with 2 for the sergeants at arms, bringing the theoretical number of horses to 300. This provision of multiple horses per knight was essential, as medieval warfare required fresh mounts for combat, travel, and the transport of supplies and equipment. Although 60 meters long, the stables could not accommodate all these animals. This suggests that additional stabling facilities must have existed elsewhere in the castle complex, or that the theoretical maximum garrison was rarely, if ever, achieved in practice. The stores of supplies meant the people in the castle would be safe from a siege. The ability to withstand prolonged sieges was a crucial aspect of castle design during the Crusader period, as supply lines were often tenuous and relief forces might take months to arrive. The castle was considered virtually impregnable and was the largest Crusader castle in the Middle East. Its reputation for impregnability was well deserved, as it successfully resisted numerous attacks and sieges throughout its history under Crusader control. The strategic significance of Krak des Chevaliers cannot be overstated. The castle occupied a commanding position overlooking the Homs Gap, a crucial corridor connecting the interior of Syria with the Mediterranean coast. Control of this route was essential for maintaining communications and supply lines between the coastal Crusader states and the interior territories. The garrison was described as being like a bone stuck in the throat of the Muslims, a vivid metaphor that captures the castle's role as a persistent obstacle to Muslim military movements and its ability to threaten enemy communications and supply routes. From Krak des Chevaliers, the Hospitallers could launch raids into Muslim-held territories, disrupting enemy activities and collecting tribute from surrounding villages. The castle served not only as a defensive stronghold, but also as a base for offensive operations, allowing the Crusaders to project power deep into the Syrian interior. By the mid-13th century, the political and military landscape of the region had shifted dramatically. The Crusader states had been weakened by internal divisions, military defeats, and the loss of key territories. Meanwhile, the Mamluk Sultanate of Egypt had emerged as a powerful and unified Muslim force determined to expel the Crusaders from the region. The Crusader fortress of Krak des Chevaliers fell to the Mamluk Sultan Baybars in 1271. Baybars went north to deal with Krak des Chevaliers after the death of Louis IX of France on 29th of November 1270. The death of Louis IX, who had been leading a crusade in Tunisia, removed any immediate prospect of reinforcement for the beleaguered Crusader states. Before marching on the castle, Baybars captured the smaller castles in the area, including Chastel Blanc. This systematic approach ensured that Krak des Chevaliers would be isolated and unable to receive support from neighbouring Crusader strongholds. On the 3rd of March of 1271, Baybars' army arrived at Krak des Chevaliers. By the time the Sultan arrived, the castle may already have been blockaded by Mamluk forces for several days. Peasants who lived in the area had fled to the castle for safety and were kept in the outer ward. This influx of refugees would have strained the castle's resources and potentially complicated its defense, as the garrison would have had additional mouths to feed and non-combatants to protect. Baybars captured the town at the foot of the castle before launching a series of assaults. He also erected siege machines and began to pummel the walls from March onwards. Baibars arrived at Krak des Chevaliers on 21st February and attacked the fortress from 3rd March. After an initial delay caused by heavy rain, the Sultan then set about pounding the castle's walls with his catapults from the 18th of March. The use of siege engines to bombard the walls represented a sustained effort to breach the castle's formidable defences. The Muslims in this way severely damaged and breached one of the walls. This breach was a critical moment in the siege, as it demonstrated that even the mighty walls of Krak des Chevaliers could be overcome with sufficient force and determination. The taking of the blacksmith's barbican was celebrated with the distribution of robes of honour, which suggests this was regarded as a significant achievement. This detail reveals the difficulty of the siege and the high value placed on each tactical success. The castle fell to a cunning trick. In 1271, Baibars, Mamluk Sultan of Egypt, managed to take the fortress after sending a forged letter to the defenders in the name of their master and commander in Tripoli, ordering them to surrender the castle. After seeming truly impregnable for centuries, Krak des Chevaliers had fallen. In the end, it only took a single sheet of paper to capture the Crusader stronghold. This dramatic conclusion to the siege demonstrates that even the strongest fortifications could be overcome through psychological warfare and deception when brute force alone proved insufficient. The forged letter was a masterstroke of medieval propaganda warfare. Exhausted from weeks of bombardment and assault, with their walls breached and their situation increasingly desperate, the defenders had little reason to doubt the authenticity of a letter apparently from their superior ordering them to surrender. The fall of Krak des Chevaliers marked a turning point in the Crusades, as it removed one of the last major obstacles to complete Mamluk control of the Syrian interior. With further construction by the Mamluks in the late 13th century, the castle ranks among the best preserved examples of the Crusader castles. The Mamluks recognized the strategic value of Krak des Chevaliers and undertook their own building program to adapt it to their needs and repair damage sustained during the siege. After its capture, Krak des Chevaliers was used as a base for Mamluk expansion towards the end of the 13th century. The castle thus continued to play a significant military role in the region, now serving its new Muslim masters as it had previously served the Crusaders. Renewed interest in Crusader castles in the 19th century led to the investigation of Krak des Chevaliers, and architectural plans were drawn up. This period of renewed interest coincided with broader European fascination with medieval history and the Crusades, as well as increased Western involvement in the Middle East. In the late 19th or early 20th century, a settlement had been created within the castle, causing damage to its fabric. The occupation of the castle by local inhabitants, whilst understandable from a practical perspective, posed significant challenges for the preservation of its historical structures. The 500 inhabitants were moved in 1933, and the castle was given over to the French Alawite state, which carried out a program of clearing and restoration. This represents an early example of heritage conservation in the Middle East, undertaken during the French Mandate period. When Syria declared independence in 1946, it assumed control. The castle has remained under Syrian government control since independence, though its status and condition have been affected by the political upheavals that have afflicted Syria in recent decades. Today, the village of Al-Husn exists around the castle and has a population of nearly 9,000. The modern village has grown up in the shadow of the ancient fortress, with the castle remaining a central feature of the local landscape and community identity. In 2006, the fortress, along with the Chalat Salah el-Din, Fortress of Saladin, was designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site. This recognition acknowledges the outstanding universal value of Krak des Chevaliers and the need to preserve it for future generations. The castle ranks among the best preserved examples of the Crusader castles. Despite nearly a millennium of history, including sieges, earthquakes, and human occupation, Krak des Chevaliers remains in remarkably good condition, allowing visitors and scholars to appreciate medieval military architecture in a way that few other sites permit. Krak des Chevaliers used to attract 5 million visitors every year. the record was 9,693 visitors in one day in April 2009. These impressive figures demonstrate the castle's status as one of Syria's premier tourist attractions and its appeal to visitors from around the world. People would come to Syria just to visit this castle and wouldn't even visit Syria's other historic sites such as Aleppo Citadel or Palmyra, according to the castle's manager, Naima Mohatem. This statement highlights the unique draw of Krak des Chevaliers, which served as a primary destination for many visitors to Syria, rather than merely one stop amongst many. The castle attracted independent travelers, large groups from cruise ships, and international art and architecture students. This diverse visitor base reflects the castle's multifaceted appeal to different audiences, from casual tourists to serious students of military architecture and medieval history. Krak des Chevaliers represents the pinnacle of Crusader military architecture and embodies numerous innovations that would influence castle design across Europe and the Mediterranean. The concentric castle design, with its multiple layers of defense, would be adopted and refined in later European fortifications, most notably in the castles built by Edward I of England in Wales. The castle's integration of natural defensive features with man-made fortifications demonstrates sophisticated understanding of both topography and military tactics. Every aspect of the castle's design, from the placement of towers to the configuration of gates and the provision of storage facilities, reflects careful planning aimed at maximizing defensive capability. The construction of Krak des Chevaliers required extraordinary engineering skill and substantial resources. The excavation of the rock-cut moat alone represents a massive undertaking that would have required the labor of hundreds or thousands of workers over an extended period. The precision with which the massive stone blocks were cut and fitted together, many without the use of mortar, demonstrates sophisticated masonry techniques. The castle's water supply system, storage facilities, and other infrastructure provisions show that the builders were thinking not just about withstanding assault, but about maintaining a large garrison over extended periods of siege. This comprehensive approach to fortress design made Krak des Chevaliers not merely a fortification, but a self-contained military community capable of independent operation. The defensive principles embodied in Krak des Chevaliers influenced military thinking far beyond its own time and place. The concept of defense in depth, with multiple fallback positions and interlocking fields of fire, would become a fundamental principle of military fortification. The castle demonstrated that with proper design and sufficient resources, a relatively small force could hold out against a much larger army, a lesson that would shape military strategy for centuries. Krak des Chevaliers stands as a physical monument to the complex history of the Crusades, a period that profoundly shaped relations between the Christian West and the Islamic East. The castle was both a symbol of Christian military power in the region and a site of cultural exchange, where Western European and Middle Eastern architectural traditions, military techniques, and cultural practices intersected. The Hospitallers who garrisoned the castle were not merely soldiers, but members of a religious order, and the castle served religious as well as military functions. The blend of military might and religious devotion that characterized the military orders of the Crusades is embodied in the castle's architecture, which includes chapels alongside barracks and storerooms. Despite its robust construction, Krak des Chevaliers has faced numerous threats to its preservation over the centuries. Earthquakes have damaged portions of the structure, and the castle has required periodic restoration to maintain its integrity. The Syrian Civil War, which began in 2011, posed new and serious threats to the castle. The fortress and its surroundings became the scene of fighting, and the castle itself sustained damage from shelling and other military action. The international community has expressed concern about the preservation of Krak des Chevaliers and other Syrian heritage sites during and after the conflict. The castle's status as a UNESCO World Heritage Site has brought attention to conservation efforts, but the practical challenges of protecting and restoring historic structures in an active conflict zone remain formidable. The outer wall of Krak des Chevaliers forms the first line of defense, constructed with massive stone blocks and punctuated by towers of varying sizes and shapes. These towers provided platforms for defensive weapons and allowed defenders to observe and fire upon approaching enemies from multiple angles. The irregular spacing and varying designs of the towers reflect the evolutionary development of the castle, with later additions incorporating more sophisticated defensive features. The inner castle, built on higher ground than the outer defenses, forms the heart of the fortress. This central stronghold contained the most important facilities of the castle, including the Great Hall, the chapter house where the Knights Hospitaller would meet, and living quarters for senior members of the order. The inner castle was designed to serve as a final refuge if the outer defenses were breached, and its elevated position allowed defenders to continue resistance even after attackers had penetrated the outer ward. One of the most impressive aspects of Krak des Chevaliers is its extensive provision for storage and supply. The castle included massive grain stores, cisterns for water collection, and storerooms for weapons, equipment, and other supplies. These facilities were essential to the castle's ability to withstand prolonged sieges. The capacity to store food and water for thousands of people for extended periods required both substantial space and sophisticated storage techniques to prevent spoilage. As a fortress of a religious military order, Krak des Chevaliers contained several spaces dedicated to religious observance. The castle's chapel, where the knights would attend mass and other religious services, was centrally located within the inner ward. The importance of religious life to the Hospitallers is reflected in the quality and prominence of these religious spaces within the overall castle design. Whilst the Crusader states established numerous castles throughout the Levant, Krak des Chevaliers stands out for its size, sophistication, and state of preservation. Other notable Crusader fortifications include the Citadel of Aleppo, Belvoir Castle, and Margat, each with its own distinctive features and historical significance. However, Krak des Chevaliers is generally considered the finest example of Crusader military architecture, combining the lessons learned from decades of castle building in the region. The influence of Krak des Chevaliers can be seen in later European castle designs, particularly the concentric castles built in Wales and elsewhere by Edward I of England in the late 13th century. Castles such as Caernarfon, Conwy, and Beaumaris incorporate many of the design principles pioneered at Krak des Chevaliers, including concentric walls, carefully planned approaches, and comprehensive defensive provisions. The Mamluks' own modifications to Krak des Chevaliers and their construction of other fortifications in the region show the influence of Crusader castle design on Islamic military architecture. The exchange of military knowledge and architectural techniques between Crusader and Muslim builders was a two-way process, with each side adapting and incorporating the innovations of the other. Krak des Chevaliers stands as an enduring monument to medieval military architecture and the complex history of the Crusades. From its origins as a Kurdish fortress through its transformation into the greatest Crusader castle to its continued significance as a UNESCO World Heritage Site, the castle has witnessed nearly a millennium of history. Its massive walls and sophisticated defensive systems demonstrate the ingenuity and determination of its medieval builders, whilst its eventual fall to Mamluk forces illustrates the limits of even the strongest fortifications in the face of determined assault and strategic cunning. Today, Krak des Chevaliers remains not only a site of outstanding architectural and historical significance, but also a symbol of the complex cultural interactions between East and West that characterized the medieval Mediterranean world. Its preservation for future generations represents both a challenge and an opportunity as the international community works to protect this irreplaceable heritage site whilst respecting its significance to the local communities that have lived in its shadow for centuries. The castle's influence extends far beyond its physical presence in the Syrian landscape. It has inspired generations of military architects, historians, and visitors, serving as a tangible connection to the medieval past and a reminder of the human capacity for both conflict and architectural achievement. As research continues and preservation efforts evolve, Krak des Chevaliers will undoubtedly continue to reveal new insights into medieval military architecture, the history of the Crusades, and the enduring human drive to create structures that both inspire awe and serve practical military purposes. Whether viewed as a masterpiece of military engineering, a monument to religious military orders, or a symbol of medieval cross-cultural interaction, Krak des Chevaliers deserves its reputation as perhaps the finest castle ever built. Its story encompasses triumph and defeat, innovation and adaptation, conflict and coexistence, making it not merely a historical monument, but a complex narrative in stone that continues to fascinate and instruct those who study it. And as always, if you enjoyed this video, tell me about your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and hit the bell so you won't miss any of our upcoming episodes. See you next time.